Boys and girls, let's take a look at our reflection practice handout. And this handout has several problems. We're just going to do problems 1 and 2 together. And if you can do 1 and 2, you should be able to handle the rest of these problems on your own. Practice 1 says graph the following points and then reflect them across the x-axis. So we first need to graph points M, N, O, and P. And then we're going to reflect them across the x-axis, which is this axis right here. So if we take point M, we have the coordinates -2, which means to the left, and 1 up. Right there's point M. And then point N is to the left as well, -2, but it's up 3, so we go all the way up here. And 3 is our y value. There's point N. And then we have O, which is 1 to the right this time, and 3 up, which would be right there. That's O. And then we have point P, which is 1 to the right and 1 up. Now, if we're to reflect these points, what we're really doing is we're reflecting them over the x-axis, which is this line array right here. So we're taking all of these points, and what we're in essence doing is we're going to reflect them over the x-axis. Let's see what their new points will be. Well, point M, if it was -2 to the left, or 2 to the left, it's going to stay 2 to the left, but instead of being 1 up, it's going to be 1 down, which is -1. So there's our new point M. Point N is also, it's going to stay to the left, but since we're reflecting it going over the x-axis, instead of being 3 above, it's going to be 3 below. So there's our new point N. Point O, which was 1 to the right, will stay to the right, but we're reflecting it over the x-axis. So if it was 3 above, now it's going to be 3 below. There's our new O. And then finally P was 1 above and 1 to the right. It'll stay 1 to the right, but now it's going to be, you guessed it, -1 or 1 below. So there's our new point P. Very good. Now let's take a look at these other problem 2 now says, well, also let's real quickly look at that question. After reflecting the points, what kind of observations can you make about the points? We kind of already said it. When we reflect over the x-axis, does our x value change? No, it stays the same. But what happens to our y value? The y value becomes the opposite. Okay, so if it was 1 above, +1, it becomes 1 below, or -1. If it was 3 above, now it's 3 below, or -3. So when we reflect over the x-axis, the x values will stay the same, but the y value will become its opposite. And some of you are already probably making a hypothesis about what happens when reflected over the y-axis. Well, first, let's start by graphing these points. Point Q is at 5, 5, so it's 5 to the right and 5 above, which we'll put right there. That's point Q. And then point R is 4 to the right and 3 above, which is right there. And I hope you guys can see this. And point S is 3 to the right and 5 above, which is right there. That's point S. Okay, and what we're doing is we're taking these points and we are going to reflect them over the y-axis. The y-axis is this guy right here. So let's start with point Q. Point Q was 5 to the right, but now it's going to be 5 to the left, which would be -5, but it's still going to stay at 5 above. So it would be right there. That's our new Q. And then R was 3 above but 4 to the right. Well, now it's going to be 4 to the left, which would be right here. And that would be my new R. And then point S, it was 5 above. It'll stay at 5 above, but what does change was it was 3 to the right. Now it's going to be 3 to the left, which would be -3. That is our new S value. Okay, so the opposite is true with reflecting across the y-axis. Our y values stay the same and our x values become their opposites. Let's do something real neat here. You know what? I don't know if you noticed this, but when you connect these points, and we're going to do this later in our unit, but when you reflect points, you can also reflect shapes, because if we were to connect these lines and say, these 4 points, that was a rectangle. Well, look, when we reflected those 4 points, we get the same rectangle reflected across the x-axis. And if we connect these points here, we had a triangle, and we reflected the same equal triangle across the y-axis. So if you're ever asked to reflect a rectangle or any geometric shape across an axis, don't think you can't handle it. We just did that.